Hello, people. I want to talk a bit about this industrial dispute involving the railways. It's predicted to be the biggest railway action in a generation. I've sort of followed it in the background. I've been following other news, the Jubilee, of course, Ukraine. It's difficult to focus on one particular story solely, but it is an important issue. So I thought it's about time I made a video about it. I was reading a piece by Mark Wallace in the Eye. Now, the Eye is usually seen as a left-wing publication, but Mark Wallace is chair of Conservative Home, so as you would imagine, he was very critical of the strike. And interestingly enough, quite a few of the editors in the Eye, this is the Eye we're talking, not the Daily Mail, were critical of the strike. By the way, I have a little ulcer in my tongue, so if I sound a bit funny today, that's the reason why. My I've very mixed views on all of this because I'm someone who's always believed in the rights of trade unionism and the right of workers to protest, to to strike if they feel that they're being treated unfairly. However, I also feel that they have to do it in a responsible way, and any action that polarizes the public will turn the public against that action. And I think a lot of people will think, well, a lot of people are struggling with the cost of living. So what makes railway workers special? Why should they get more? Um, Rob Roberts, who's a Conservative MP from Wales, points out that the average salary of Network Rail staff is 44,000. That's going to be drivers and so on. But as I understand it, these strikes are not including drivers. Um, Apparently, it's issues around staff lower down the scale, cleaners, security people, and so on. I mean, it's one of the biggest employers in the country. But I think it's important if the contention is about greed. So this idea that's been leveled at the strikers that they're greedy, they just want more. Maybe they are, but it's worth looking at the executives of Network Rail, and it's a similar story with other railway companies. But this is the leading executives of Network Rail, what they're earning. Now, this is from the SSA, which is a union, so they're biased. But assuming these figures are correct, this is the figures. Andrew Haynes, chief executive, £585,000. Now he's justified that on the grounds that he gets less than his predecessor, who was on more than 700,000. Jeremy Westlake, chief financial officer, 415,000. Susan Cookland, managing director, route services, 385,000. Timothy Shoveler, managing director, North West and Central, 330,000. I imagine that region is because Manchester is one of the, as I understand it, one of the headquarters of Network Rail. I think it is actually the headquarters of Network Rail, hence the priority for that region. Mark Langman, Managing Director, Wales and Western, 330,000. John Halsall, Managing Director, Southern, 330,000. Going further down the list, it's quite a lengthy list. Um, Mostly men, but some women as well. Harriet Hepburn, Corporate Finance and Business Development Director, 195,000. Anit Chandarana, Chief of Staff, 175,000. Paula Hayes, Head of Reward, whatever that is, 145,000. Paul Marshall, Group Controller, 170,000. Mark Killick, Route Director, Wessex, 170,000. Tim Coucher, Capital Delivery Director, Southern, 165,000. Now, those salaries add up to a total of over 15 million. 15 million. It's a lot of money for salaries. Um, I personally feel that 585,000, even if it is a reduction, is a huge salary. I think it's definitely overpaid. Why? Because if we look at our railways, and it's a similar situation with other executives in other railway companies, you know, this country invented railways, right? So there's a long association with railways in the United Kingdom. but I think most people would feel they're not value for money. Railway prices in Britain are by far the priciest in Europe. Services are often unreliable, there are often delays. Um, so I think many people will question if that salary is justified. Now, to put it in context, Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, makes 164,000 a year. That's his salary. Whatever you think of Johnson, he is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, right? He's a world leader, or at least he's in the position of a world leader. Whether you think he is or not is another matter. Um, Senior cabinet ministers, the foreign secretary, the chancellor, the home secretary, and so on, are on slightly less. But the point is, I mean, let's look at those figures again, right? Is it really justified that Lorraine Martins, as the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Network Rail, she's on 160,000? That's similar to the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Is that really justified? I mean, she's Director of Diversity and Inclusion. Um, I would question that. Now, what Conservatives will say is RMT bosses who are pushing for strike action are themselves greedy. Mick Lynch, for example, his salary, he's a head of RMT, it's 124,000. That's probably too much. If we're talking about the issue of salaries, that's probably too much for a union boss. Um, but I will say that Conservatives are inconsistent with this. They'll attack greedy union bosses, but they won't attack the fat cat salaries of chief executives. Let's have some consistency. Um, I was looking at an article from National. Now, this is not to be confused with the Scottish paper of the same name, which is very pro independence. The National is a Welsh publication and it's billed as apolitical. Network Rail boss called high salaries a lesson about working harder at school. This article is by Neil Lansfield and Alan Jones, and it's from April. Rail workers voting on strikes over pay have been angered after a communications boss defended high pay for bosses as a lesson for those who should have probably worked harder at school. Network Rail's Nicky Hughes, head of communications for Network Rail's Wales and Western region, sparked a furious response after she made the comment while defending the high pay of senior leaders. In a message on the state owned rail infrastructure company's internal social media platform, Ms. Hughes wrote that all businesses compete for managers and pay accordingly. She added, "It's a lesson to those of us who should probably have worked harder at school." Ms. Hughes later issued an apology saying she was so sorry her comment had caused such offence, adding, "I absolutely was referring to myself." Okay, but is this just an indication of how out of touch top executives are? And she is a spokesperson for the top executives. I think it may well be. Now, she did apologise, but um, a Network Rail spokesman said her comments were misconstrued and she was referring to her own experiences. Well, she should have been more clear about that. Um, that's kind of it's a side issue. I think that's the sort of thing that can lose focus of the main issues at stake here. Um, just go read a bit more of the report. The RMT said Network Rail is planning to cut at least 2,500 safety critical maintenance jobs as part of a £2 billion reduction in spending, while workers at train operators have been subject to pay freezes and changes to their terms and conditions. Have the leading executives had pay freezes? That's what I'd like to know. Tim Shoveler, the organisation's regional director, said, "Our railway has been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic, and even as passenger numbers start to recover, we know travel habits and passenger demand have changed and the industry has to change too. We cannot keep relying on government handouts, and so we must work together with train operators and our trade unions to save millions of pounds and deliver a more efficient railway." Well, you, Mr. Shoveler, certainly didn't struggle. Um, anyway, the issue for me is about consistency. So a lot of conservatives will say the unions are greedy; they just want more money for their members, and a railway driver on 44,000 is asking for more is greedy. But The point about these strikes is that it's for members who are on the lower end of the scale. Now, whether they should get a hike or not is a matter of debate. Um, Certainly, nurses and other public sector workers. I mean, that 1% offering that the Chancellor gave last year was pathetic, utterly pathetic. But one big problem I have with, well, firstly, in terms of the unions, I don't favour massive scale industrial action that will adversely affect the public. I don't think there's any justification for knowingly causing mass disruption. I think that is definitely something that shouldn't be done, particularly if they are ignoring talks with the government. And I do think that union bosses just will itch at every chance to have a go at the Tories. So I think there's politics at play there. But I will say that something I've always disliked about conservative thinking is this tendency to attack, for example, unions, but Tory MPs will have nothing to say about the 585,000 that Haynes is getting. Now, is £585,000 really justified? And people might say it's trivial or not trivial, but they might say it's not about salaries, but that's the whole point. It really is. It really is. The strikers are striking for higher salaries. So I would say that is central to the whole debate. Um, I personally think that executives are massively overpaid, given how unreliable the system often is, given the number of delays, given the fact that British commuters are the most priced in Europe. I just think that their salaries should reflect the service delivered, and I don't think the service delivered justifies their high salaries. I think it should be half of that for the chief executive. But as long as we have a government that will always always be reluctant to attack those sort of executives. I mean, you will never get a Tory government criticizing the salary of a chief executive. It just doesn't happen. And perhaps this is a more left wing side of me coming out, but my gut feeling is that lack of consistency is a problem. So, if you feel that the strikers are greedy and they're selfish and they're causing this disruption, I kind of agree with that. But I think it at least be consistent, at least acknowledge, well, if the issue is about pay, if the issue is about um, greed, then shouldn't the chief executives, certainly they should have a pay freeze. I mean, we're all struggling. They're certainly not struggling. Um, so I do wonder how do they justify their vast salaries? I mean, are you really going to tell me that, let's see, the head of diversity and inclusion should be getting a salary that's similar to the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom? I don't think so. Now, I accept that a director for a region is going to get more than a cleaner, sure, but people in the lower end of the scale on minimum wage, people may sort of say those jobs are they're not the same level of responsibility. But if you take people for granted and if you treat them in that sort of way, then it all adds up. I think to delivery. But that's my gut feeling. I probably haven't vocalized this as well as I could have, but I'll put links to the articles. Let me know what you think. I personally just my gut feeling is that yes, unions can be ruthless. Yes, these union bosses often they have pretty far left worldviews, so they don't really care about disruption caused to the public. I do think that they deserve a lot of the criticism they get, but I think that too many people ignore the other side of it, which is the fact that these chief executives are massively overpaid, and I don't think they're delivering. I mean, particularly in the southeast, you look at, and this perhaps is involving other railway companies, but like I say, they're all on similar sort of rates. If you are, say, commuting from Brighton to London or Horsham to London, right, and you have a season ticket, the season ticket prices are going up and up and up. They average now in the thousands, and then you're subject to regular delays. Would people in that region, for example, really feel its value for money? I don't think so. How then do the executives justify their salary? I think a salary should be vindicated on delivery. And I would say Britain's railways, generally speaking, don't fully deliver, not as well as they could. Certainly by no means the worst in the world, but we do have some of the priciest tickets in Europe. Um, where I travel, from usually from Dumfries, excuse me, Newcastle to Dumfries, that is actually pretty reasonable at £43 return. Now that's pretty good. But other prices around the country on different companies, that's ScotRail, I believe, um, are a lot heftier. I mean, it's ridiculous that it is cheaper to fly to another European city than it is to go to cities within our own country. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. I will put links to these articles.